Hey, does anyone remember when tier list videos were cool? Neither do I. Well, during this time of social isolation, I wanted to give you all a little bit of a video as a treat. Originally I wanted to record this out there so we could have nature in the background and we could hang out with the cats, but I realized that you could not see my dinky little school computer screen from 2 feet away, so we're in here in my father's movie room with this huge screen with our friend, the shark. This is going to be a little bit more of an awkward video because I'm used to seeing myself in my phone screen, but I'm having to use my rear camera this time so this doesn't get all reversed. Speaking of this, we are talking today about bastard protagonists, and we are ranking them. Now, I have gathered a list of about 20 characters from popular literature, and I have diagnosed all these characters with what I call bastard protagonist syndrome. Now, what bastard protagonist syndrome is basically a character who is a terrible person, but we are inextricably linked to them because we are invested in their story, and basically we are forced to like them despite all their inadequacies and just terribleness. So, I sort of want to jump into ranking them on a list between, what my favorite is on the A++ to F tier. And, we're just going to get going in no particular order. Let's talk about, in my opinion, sort of the pinnacle of this trope. It'll kind of help us define it. My dear Hammy Boy. Where is he? There he is. There's like a delay, and it hurts me. So, Hamlet. Hamlet, in my opinion, is truly, truly A++ tier. Hamlet is a terrible person. He is a conniver. He absolutely gaslights everyone in the entire play. He causes trouble for no reason. He is vengeful, and he is, honestly, you could call him evil, and I wouldn't refute it. It's not Corona. But honestly, while you're reading Hamlet or while you're watching a production, you just don't care because Hamlet is so fun to watch and you're so invested in his story because he is so invested in his sort of plot for revenge. And there's something to be said about how just absolutely incomprehensible his plan is that just makes it so fun to watch and makes you so invested in a terrible person, a murderer, but Hamlet is so fun. And he never shuts up, which, even though it's a play, it still gives you sort of like an insight into what he's thinking at basically any time. But it also still gives you sort of a break from that while you're watching a scene with other characters. Moving on, Hamlet will forever stay in my heart. We'll move on to... This is in no particular order. We'll move on to probably who everyone thought of when you think of a protagonist who isn't a good person. Ebenezer Scrooge, or as I've written here, and kept because it made me laugh so hard, Scroog. Scroog is... Ebenezer Scrooge, he is an awful person. I mean, basically the first third of the of his entire story is invested entirely in proving to the audience that he is an irredeemably terrible person. And so that really lends to him because you're invested in his story. You get invested in his character purely because of how terrible he is. However, I am going to have to dock points because the point of the story is sort of curing him of bastard protagonist syndrome and turning him into a better person. So I'm going to have to put Scroog. Woo, where are you going, Scroog? Oh, Scroog. I'm going to have to put Scroog in... We're going to put him in C tier. I'm really going to have to dock a lot of points because he ends up being a good person and then he's just a normal protagonist and not a bastard protagonist. But, I mean, for that first third of the book, he is definition of bastard protagonist syndrome. moving on to let's move on to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, I debated on whether or not to include these as different characters, but I ended up deciding to do that, to rank them separately, because they're both bastard protagonists in their own way. I mean, we generally think of Mr. Hyde as the sort of Jekyll's bastard protagonist side, but the thing is, Jekyll still has that in him. It's just Hyde that kind of brings it out to the max. So, Mr. Hyde, I'll start with Mr. Hyde. Mr. Hyde is basically the pinnacle of evil, of man's evil, and he, like, doesn't have any remorse, or, you know, doesn't, like, put any second thought into any of his actions. And the thing is, you're not absolutely invested in what happens to him. The thing is, like, the characters are, and if anything, you're invested, at least as a modern reader, you're invested because of Dr. Jekyll, but you're not necessarily invested individually in Mr. Hyde. So although he is absolutely a bastard, I'm not going to have to put him incredibly high. I'm probably going to put him on the same level as Scroog. Now, Dr. Jekyll, however, this is where it gets interesting, because even though he sort of drank his potion to separate that side out of him, even it's detailed in sort of the last part of the book that even though that is sort of separated out of him, he still has sort of it's called, like, ill desires of Hyde when he's still when he is Dr. Jekyll. And so you're sort of invested in this sort of upright man, like, who's like a pillar of the community and super sociable, and yet when he is Dr. Jekyll, he does still have these sort of dark desires. They never tell you what it is, by the way, and that kind of made me laugh, because it's this sort of Victorian idea of just vague sin, and it made me laugh a little bit. So Dr. Jekyll is less bastard, but he's more complex. So I'm going to have to put him in, if it'll go, yep, put him up to B. Now, let's go back in time a little bit, and let's talk about Odysseus from the Odyssey. Now, my favorite part about Odysseus is that, I mean, his motives are pretty pure. I mean, he just wants to get back to his family. But every step he does along the way makes him just absolutely fall into bastard category. I mean, the man does everything he can do to make Poseidon his personal enemy, and in doing so, he stays away from his home for 20 years. And honestly, he didn't have to go to the Trojan War. That's all him. Whoops. 1 second. We're gonna pause. Alright, I'm back. I totally just turned my computer off. Alright, so we were talking about Odysseus. Yeah, he is a conniving little sneak, and I kind of adore him if he wasn't such a murderer. I don't know, he's about mid-level. I absolutely adore his gall to just absolutely piss off Odysseus, or totally piss off Poseidon while sort of getting in good with Athena. Just absolutely picking sides. I would say he's a solid B. A solid B. There we go. Okay. Now we're gonna move on back to the 19th century with Victor Frankenstein. What to say about Victor Frankenstein? The man is so pathetic, and I love him. He basically goes into an absolute fever anytime anything goes wrong in his life. And I mean, the man goes to college, he drops out, he doesn't get a doctorate, he's not a doctor. So Mr. Frankenstein, he's a terrible person, and a lot of people, upon first reading, like, absolutely just... Sebastian, stop playing with that. He was chewing on my charger. Alright, upon first reading, sort of just like dismiss him and call him like an absentee father because he basically just creates life and then abandons it to the wind because he doesn't like the color of its eyes. And so yeah, he's irresponsible, and I think that firmly places him in bastard category. But he's so lovable, and he's lovable almost entirely because he's telling this story to someone who adores him so much. Kind of forget his name, but yeah, he's telling the story to someone who just like absolutely entirely devoted to him. So yeah, he's lovable, but he's just so pathetic that I place him in D tier, but like it's a loving D tier. I look down upon him and I'm like, oh, you poor thing. But yeah, there's no way I'm placing him anything higher than D. We're moving back in time again to Don Quixote. What a dumbass. Like, there's Oblivious, and then there's Don Quixote. Like, the man is just... You don't know how to approach him. He's just like... He's like a crazy person from a John Mulaney bit. Everything he does is just so inexplicable, and yet kind of hilarious. But I don't know what else to say about him. I mean, the man is just... And you're not that invested in him. If anything, you're invested in poor Sancho, who's like strung along for the ride with him. But you're not invested in Don Quixote. I mean, the man's just kind of an idiot. But, you know, I place him in D tier. I don't think he's F, because I don't hate him. He's just kind of... It's just kind of someone you see on the street, and then you look at him sadly and go about your day. I don't know. Alright, let me make sure I'm recording. Yes, I am. Okay. So, let's move forward in time again. I like this sort of ping pong that we're doing. To a sort of more modern hit. We're going to move on to... I want to talk about Winston from 1984. Hi, Russell. Winston from 1984. He's sort of a unique stance in that he's kind of a bit more of just like an audience surrogate kind of protagonist. But because of Orwell's writing, okay, the way that Orwell writes, and by proxy, the way that Winston speaks about the book's only female character is just so troublingly horny, and it's just terrible, and that alone just places him into, ew, kind of just like instant bastard. But, I mean, you know, the thing is, Winston, he serves his purpose. Stop fighting! Russell! Calm down. I'm gonna pick him up. Alright. But yeah, Winston serves his purpose as in the plot. Say hi to Sebastian, everyone. He is a very long cat. I'm sorry. I'll put you down. Thank you. Alright. Anyway, yeah. Winston, he serves his purpose as the plot. He's mostly just an audience surrogate. And so literally his only character trait is troublingly horny, and that's it. And it's just because of Orwell writing about Julia. So, yeah, I don't know. He just kind of concerns me a little bit. But since he served his purpose in the plot, you know what? No, D. Horny people don't get rights. So, yeah, D. Look at the tier list so far. Hamlet is the only one with a considerable score, so we are going to move. Let's see, we just did a modern one. Let's go back. Back to Greece. Achilles. Now, Achilles... Actually, no, scratch that. Before we do Achilles, we have to do Agamemnon. Agamemnon. What to say about Agamemnon? A terrible man. A terrible man. And he's kind of one of the ones that I have to place most sort of weirdly in the protagonist, because he's never really a protagonist. Depending on his appearance, he's mostly a bastard supporting character, or a bastard antagonist. But the reason Agamemnon gets on this list is because Agamemnon always thinks he's the protagonist. He always thinks he has this sort of divine duty to kill his daughter or whatever. And he's just so stubborn, and he's violent, and he's warmongering, and I hate his guts. So, Agamemnon, welcome to our first F tier. Snaps for him. Agamemnon's terrible. Read the Iliad. He's the worst. He basically throws a hissy fit. Well, okay, first, if you haven't read Iphigenia, he literally sacrifices his daughter to the gods just to get to the Trojan War, which the Trojan War was pointless. You didn't have to do the Trojan War. Just let Helen marry who she wants. And then, so he gets to the Trojan War. He pisses off Achilles because he... Anyway. Yeah, he wants to, like, sacrifice... He sacrifices too many people. And he's so stubborn. And he just doesn't... Anyway, I could rant for a while about Agamemnon. I'll spare you. But you can't talk about Agamemnon without his equally long-named wife, Clytemnestra. Clytemnestra is, forgive my usage, a queen. She's not literally a queen, but, you know. Clytemnestra, she deserves the world. She had to put up with so much. I mean, view things from her perspective. She had her daughter sacrificed by her husband. What are you gonna do? Probably kill your husband. She does. And now, see, this is where Bastard Protagonist goes from characters who are objectively bad to characters who are subjectively bad. Subjectively bad people. Because Clytemnestra, her actions are hella justified, but in Grecian society, apparently it's not good for women to kill people, even though men do it all the time. But, speaking of ladies, hi. This is Viola. We haven't seen too much of her in my videos. She's very sweet. But yeah, Clytemnestra's actions are super justified, and basically she spurns an entire trilogy just because of her wanting justifiably to kill her husband. And yeah, I personally, I love Clytemnestra, but she doesn't, but because she simply falls out of this sort of bastard protagonist formula, I'm going to have to put her in B, but it's not for my lack of love for her, it's simply because she doesn't quite match the formula. I am going to step on you, Viola. You shouldn't sleep there. Oh, man. Okay. And now we're staying in Greece, and now we're going to talk about Achilles. Achilles, in at least the beginning of the Iliad, serves as a bit of a foil to Agamemnon, as they have their sort of main hissy fit conflict before the actual start of the war. And Achilles, the man is such a drama queen. I love him so much. Achilles, I mean, everyone knows him for, you know, being invincible except for the heel. Everyone knows the heel, but, I mean, the man just wanted to hang out with his boyfriend, and then, like, he gets my support because he, for a while, didn't participate in the Trojan War. He was there, but he didn't participate, and then he only did participate once they killed his boyfriend, and he got angry. Russell, stop being mean. You're a grumpy cat. Alright, sorry. I can't excuse his actions. Alright, anyway, but yeah, Achilles, I can't excuse his actions because anything he did out of love, man. And yeah, he's objectively, he's not a great person. He's a drama queen, he's a little bit self-obsessed, but I mean, man just loves love, and he wanted to hang out with his boyfriend, and, I don't know, play the harp, and he was, or the lyre, and he was fine. Achilles gets an A from me, and you can quote me on that. Oh man, I talked about Victor. I almost forgot to talk about Victor's boy. Victor's little boy. His creation, Frankenstein's monster, if you will. But here's the thing. Not a monster. He's just a little boy who wants to be loved. Okay, he's an 8-foot tall boy who wants to be loved, and he has crazy eyes. But, I mean, all he wants is recognition from the world without absolute fear, and he wants a girlfriend, and that's the two things he wants in life. And he was mistreated, and he did he did murder. He did murder a few people, and he framed another person. And so, not a good person. His actions are not entirely 100% defensible. Hi, Sebastian. But I mean, this boy didn't have a good moment in his entire life. You cannot say that he was a product of his upbringing, and that's entirely Victor's fault. So we're gonna put Victor's boy up with Clytemnestra in B. So we're gonna go. Let's see. That was 19th century. Let's go back a little bit, and we're gonna talk about. It's a little hard to read way over there on the left. Excuse me. A Midsummer Night's Dream without Helena. And yes, I do mean literally the entire cast of A Midsummer Night's Dream, except for Helena. The whole plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream would not work if everyone wasn't just terrible. I mean, obviously there's all of the fairies who are pretty much just act in their own self-interest and like tool with all the mortals just because they want to see what would happen. And then, I mean, there's like all the Grecian adults who are, like forcing marriages despite their children's wishes. And then there's, Lysander and, all of the sort of four main lovers, minus Helena, who all just sort of act. Granted, a few of them were drugged by, the magic flower, but their actions are all in like super self-interest, and so basically no one's actions are defensible, and like the entire plot is just so incomprehensible because it's so chaotic. But yeah, and I am leaving Helena out of this because she's the one genuine good person who just kind of like she knows what she wants, but like she doesn't go after it selfishly. And when she knows that something is up, she calls bullshit, and she doesn't like take what she wants at the first chance she gets. So sort of everyone here gets like a C. The entire cast, because stop it, we're gonna knock it over. Our Christmas tree is still up. But yeah, so everyone here kind of gets a C. It's just so chaotic, and I kind of love it. But yeah, no one is a super terrible person, and it all ends up nice in the end. But yeah, if you knock down my camera, don't stay on my teddygrams. Don't touch my teddygrams. Sorry, I'll chew. All right. Let's move on to. Let's move forward in time to Gatsby, the Great. Man, this sort of goes back to my horny people have no rights. Sebastian, be careful. I know you're curious, but please, if you knock it over, everyone say hi to Sebastian. Alright, buddy. Come on. I know you're trying to sniff it, but... Alright. Okay, so let's talk about The Great Gatsby. In my opinion, The Great Gatsby is the greatest comedic novel of the 20th century. And Gatsby is really just emblematic of that. Now, he's so inexplicable. I'm gonna put you down. Don't take this up. Alright. He kind of goes back to my horny people have no rights idea of, stop it. He goes after this one girl for, like, his entire life. And the first time he talks to her, that first scene where they interact, it's just hilarious because he's an awkward little boy. He does not know how to talk to women. And, I don't know, he's he's not a terrible person, but he's very obsessive, and that's kind of gross. But frankly, I don't know what he did to make Nick Carraway fall so deeply in love with him. But I mean, I don't know. The man's not hot. The man's a D. All right, let's go back in time to the Macbeths, both of them. So, again, Mr. Macbeth, he goes back to my, he's so pathetic, but not in a good way, or an endearing way, like Victor. He's just kind of, man, if you're gonna kill the King of Scotland, just do it. Macbeth would not be as entertaining if it weren't for Lady Macbeth. So, Macbeth by himself, he gets placed in D tier. But Lady Macbeth, now that's a bastard protagonist. She's got big bastard protagonist energy. She knows what she wants. She's gonna murder people to get it. She provides the motivation for her husband, who, if Lady Macbeth wasn't there, Macbeth would not have done it, like half of the stuff he did. And whether that's good or bad, I'll let you decide. But here's the thing. Macbeth by himself, not that fun to hang out with, not that fun to experience as a character. But Lady Macbeth, that's an interesting character. We are moving Lady Macbeth to a solid B tier. Yeah, she kind of exists to serve, to make Macbeth a little bit more interesting as a character, to serve as a bit of a foil. Now, let's talk about George from Of Mice and Men. George, Viola, be careful. I'm looking at you. Don't press stuff on the screen with your little wet nose. If you make me stop recording, I swear. Alright. So, yeah, George. George is just a miserable little man. And stop it! You're gonna knock it over. Right. Yeah, George is a miserable little man. And he's not fun to, sort of experience the story with. He's very pragmatic and just kind of annoying. Basically, oh my god. He's wrestling around in a paper bag out there. It's like one of his favorite things to do. But yeah. Yeah, he basically serves to be a foil to the character that readers are actually invested in, which is Lenny. And I don't know, he's just not very fun, but again, sort of like Winston, he serves a purpose in his story. And yeah, I don't know, George is he's not fun, but he serves his purpose, and he's definitely a bastard. And because of his sort of inextricable connection to Lenny, you are sort of by proxy invested in him. Now we're going to talk about Heathcliff. Heathcliff, he's not my favorite. Stop fighting! I will preface this by saying, this Wuthering Heights is the book I am currently reading. I'm only about a third of the way through. But, yeah, Heathcliff, I think he's definitely not a protagonist. He's not exactly the protagonist. You could debate, but he's not the protagonist, but he's such a bastard. He's a terrible person. In every scene, you expect to see some sort of glimmer of hope in him, or some sort of redemption, but you just don't. And again, I'm only a third of the way through, but I don't expect to see a redemption because he just seems to be so thoroughly terrible. And I don't know, he's just so emblematic of this trope, because from what I've seen so far, Wuthering Heights exists to sort of examine his character and sort of the lives that of his family and the people that he's interacted with over his life. And so it's almost sort of a character study, so because, like, the narrator is invested, you are inherently invested in his story, but he's just such a terrible person, but, he sort of takes over your mind, like he's the only thing you can think about, and you need to find out more about how he sort of, came into his money and his fortune and his education. And I don't know, it's just kind of fascinating how he's not my favorite to hang out with of these characters, but like he's not my favorite person to like be in the scene with. But because he's so emblematic of the trope, I have to put him in A. Now, we're going to talk about Dorian Gray now. Now, this one I will say, The Picture of Dorian Gray is my favorite book. So I may be a little bit biased, but I am going to put him immediately in A+. And again, Hamlet is also another one of my favorite books. But, so definitely some bias here, but Dorian Gray, the reason he's so high is because not only is he so emblematic of this trope, but the purpose of the story is to examine this trope. The Picture of Dorian Gray examines his, like, corruption, basically going from this sort of innocent little, like, boy to turn him into a bastard protagonist. Now, in this way, he's sort of like the opposite of Scroog, who starts out as the bastard protagonist, and we see him sort of absolved. But Dorian Gray, it examines the corruption and the becoming of a bastard protagonist, and I don't know. I just find it so fascinating, and and I think there's something about you get invested in his character when he's this innocent little bright-faced boy, and you kind of go along the ride with him, and so you're still invested in him, even though he's a murderer, and he causes the death of a young girl, and when you think about it, these are probably two of the worst people. They're both murderers, and they both like cause the death of a young innocent girl, but they're both so absolutely, their bastardness is so absolutely vital to the plot, and that they are sort of just the symbols of this trope. So yeah, he's a terrible person, but The Picture of Dorian Gray wouldn't be a story without him being that way. So I don't know, and he's just the way he sort of waxes philosophical always. I don't know, he's just fascinating to explore as a character, and I don't know, I really love him even though he's absolutely terrible. But yeah, now I saved this one specifically for last because Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye is one of my least favorite books. And what to say about Holden? He's not terrible. He's not as terrible of a person. His actions are not as terrible as many of the others on this list, especially these two up here. But he's not fun to be with. He's not fun to experience the story with. And he's whiny, and he is a hypocrite, and he's just terrible. Holden Caulfield is toxic to be around. And I don't know, there's something, it's not an examination of his character. We're supposed to take his character as, a given, and, while we're supposed to examine these characters for their terribleness, Holden Caulfield is terrible, and yet they expect us to sympathize with him and take him to be just a regular person, not terrible. He's F. he's not fun. His thoughts, you're sort of always in his stream of consciousness, and you just always want a break. And, you know, with Hamlet, and a little bit with Dorian Gray, you get a break, because there's these, in Hamlet, there's, you know, scenes with other people, and, you know, soliloquies of other people, and Hamlet isn't always in it. And with Dorian Gray, you get these scenes of dialogue and these monologues from, like, Lord Henry or Basil, and you're given breaks. But with Holden, it's just always there, and he's always whining, and he's always terrible, and he's equal to Agamemnon, who is an actual murderer in my book. So yeah, this is kind of my tier list of terrible characters from literature. And yeah, I have to say, just looking back over it, I pretty much agree. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna sign off. I hope you enjoyed the cats. Horny people have no rights. Wash your hands. Take a shower. Just because, you know, hygiene, and I'll see you on the other side of this whole mess.